Welcome to The Yin Project. I'm your host, Emily Bevan. Today, we are talking with Mairin McCracken, a kindergarten teacher and a yoga teacher. She has a newsletter that goes out every Sunday called The Huddle, and you can find it at movewithmairin.com. Let's get started. Hi, Mairin.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. So happy to have you.
My pleasure. So glad to be here.
And you have such an interesting background because you're a teacher in like many different senses of the world. You're a kindergarten teacher and you're a yoga teacher. And we've kind of talked a little bit about that. And for a long time, you were trying to kind of find your identity, and you realized at one point, like, I can be both things. I can have multi identities. Like, talk us through that. I have experienced that as well. I've changed my career several different times. Who knows what will be in store for either of us tomorrow or, 10 years, 20 years, what that will look like. So talk to me about that process of when you kind of had that realization, like, I don't fit in a box and I can be a lot of different things.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, right? Because I feel like all of us play so many different roles, whether it's like, in your family and your friends and, hobbies, whatever. And then for some reason, we've been conditioned to think that in your career, it should just be one role, steady. So I grew up as a dancer, and so that's a huge part of my identity is this
what
movement
kind of dance?
piece. Oh gosh, I did it all.
You did it all. Yeah. I did dance too. I went to school for the arts.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So it's just it's such a huge part of your identity. Did you do modern? I did modern.
Did you wear those shoes? I love those shoes.
Oh my
I remember
gosh,
dancing to like Enya.
Shoes.
Like Enya was like the jam back in modern dance.
The modern shoes were like very 90s to me. Somewhere along the way.
Well, I'm like a 90s child.
Okay, yeah. I did all of that, did the competitions, did all of it. And then when I went to college, went in as a dance major. But at USF, it's not a dance major. It's called Performing Arts and Social Justice.
Oh, those are kind of...
I know.
Okay.
So it's like art as activism, basically. Is like they're kind of like...
And that's what you got your degree in.
So I ended up pivoting. I got a foot injury, or I had a foot injury. I got surgery. It was a whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And so during that time, I was like, well, I should really look into like, not having this be my primary focus. And I was already kind of
because your body
that.
as like, you look at professional basketball players, any professional athlete, like if you have an injury and then you're sort of like, well, what do I do? For the rest of my life.
Exactly.
Like you have to think about that. You have to have a contingency plan, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And I already have, it must just be sort of a personality thing, I think, too, where I already have like always had like several different interests and lots of different passions. And so I was already thinking like maybe I don't want to just major in dance and just focus on that. I had like lots of other things going on, and I was then I pivoted to a sociology major, which I loved. And then even within that, I was like, okay, what do you do with it? Like the classic college, what do I do with this, right?
Yeah. I loved all my psych classes, but then you're like, what do you do with this?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So one of my best friends was in the dual degree program at USF at the time, which you can do your master's in teaching and your bachelor's at the same time.
Okay.
Which is so cool that they have that. And so she loved it, and she was a psych major.
Okay.
So I decided to try it on, and I mean, going in teaching, like people will always tell you like there's going to be points where you want to quit or you want to burn out. You don't think this is for me because it's just there's so much to it, and it's not glamorous, and it's really so there were a bunch of times even throughout the program where I was like, I don't know, and then times where I was like, yes, like a hard yes, I love this. And so anyways, then I got my degree in teaching. Throughout all that time, though, I was teaching dance on the side, and then got my first job teaching in the Bayview district in a charter school, and that was really intense. And so that was really my primary focus for that first year, just like all in on, working with kids in the Bayview and what that entailed. It was a lot, kind of like baptism by fire, I would say. Yeah.
And was that in kindergarten specifically?
That was in 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I taught 5th grade math for 4 years there.
Okay.
And And then somewhere in that, I started teaching yoga. And I think I was always taking yoga, and I knew that I someday would want to teach yoga. And it just felt more like I was missing that creative outlet that dance had provided me.
Right.
Not so much just the movement, but just having that outlet to kind of create something and move my body in a way that felt intuitive, where I was kind of out of my head. And so then in 2016, I taught my first yoga class kind of just by accident. A teacher didn't show up that day, and the owner of the studio was like, "Do you want to just step in and wing it?" And I was like, "Yes."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Probably not the most kosher way to do it. Not, didn't have my credential at the time, but stepped in. They knew me very well because I'd been at that studio for so long. They knew I was a dance teacher. They're like, "Can you just do this?" So I did that, and then I went, the formal way and got my certification.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there were a few times where I thought, okay, maybe I'll leave teaching. So when I was leaving the charter school, I was planning to move down to Southern California to be close to my family. My mom was sick at the time, and it just felt like I needed to move down. I also just was kind of getting burnt out a little bit at the charter in that context of what I was teaching and where I was teaching, and
so you felt like you were sort of like, I have to make a decision, and you have to pick one or the other.
I felt like I felt some pressure to pick one or the other. I also felt
where was that pressure coming from?
Totally just from myself. Yeah. I also just kind of felt like when you go through a breakup and you're like, I can't even imagine dating someone else right now.
Yes, I think about that all the time. I think about if God forbid anything happened to my husband, I'm like, nope, I'm done. I've been dating since I was 16, no interest. Yeah.
So I was talking to a friend who was also leaving her school at the time, and she said this, both of us were just not looking at other teaching jobs for a little while, So I was like, I'm going to leave, and I think I'll just teach yoga. I don't know, but mentally I was just kind of floating. I wasn't really trying very hard to find a new job or find something full time.
This is after the charter.
After the charter, when I was still teaching there, but I knew I was leaving, so I was looking for jobs or whatever. And then I just happened to be walking in the park one day, and I ran into my old mentor teacher from when I was doing my student teaching, and she was like, "I'm leaving next year. I'm going on sabbatical. You should think about filling in for me." And I was like, oh, I thought I was just going to teach yoga. I thought I was going to move down south. I had all these plans. And then I ended up taking that job and staying in San Francisco and teaching again. But that was only a one-year position. So then again, I was like, okay, this is going to give me a year to figure out what I want to do and build up my yoga thing, and then maybe just do yoga full-time. And then the pandemic hit, and then that didn't happen. So there were all these, it was partly me, but it was also felt like kind of serendipitous, invisible hands. The universe is kind of just kind of kept nudging me back to the classroom.
Because it sounds like at this point you were kind of you were feeling burnout and you were not committed to teaching. Yeah,
I was feeling I don't know if burnout is fully resonates.
And I don't fully understand burnout, so I'd love to talk about that because I know that you have colleagues, and especially with the pandemic, and we can talk about that a little bit more because I don't know what that feels. I know what it feels like in my industry, but I don't know what it feels like in your industry.
Yeah. I think when I think about feeling burnout, I just think of moments when I just felt so depleted, physically, emotionally, mentally. And when I didn't feel maybe a ton of validation coming in from the outside world, whether it was colleagues or whether it was feeling like I needed that because I was so depleted, I felt like I needed more cheerleading or something, and I think that is when I was first teaching, it was so hard, but I had a really close cohort of teachers who I was teaching at that charter school with. So even though it was hard, it was you had that camaraderie,
right?
And then as your career goes on, you don't necessarily need that much camaraderie, in a way, because you feel more confident on your own. But then when SHIT hits the fan.
You can say SHIT on the show. It's okay.
There's no kindergartners listening.
There's no kindergartners listening. No.
When shit hits the fan, you want that. You want that close network. So
I feel that 100%. I've been selling real estate for 7 years, And I'm not on a team per se, but I love collaborating with other agents because at the end of the day, the business can get really lonely. And when the buck just always stops with you, and you don't necessarily have someone to talk to and bounce ideas off of and cover for you when you're traveling or your kid is sick, et cetera, like it can be a really lonely job. So like I understand that. And teaching is, in a way, it's you. And you have the, a support system. I have a support system, but you're the one that's, conducting the function on your own. It's kind of a solo event, so to speak. So like, I understand kind of what I'm hearing is loneliness.
Yes, that's exactly, totally. Like it sounds, to me, I don't know, maybe that's just the connotation I have, where it was a little more complex. Like I was feeling really depleted, and then in that moment of depletion, I felt that loneliness, that isolation, because you're right. Like it's just you. Yeah. You're not getting all that adult interaction throughout your day to day, and you don't feel like you have that, witness to just notice and like observe what you're doing and be like, yeah, that's really hard, or like, you handled that the best way you could. Yeah. And,
I don't think I told you this, but my mom was a Montessori teacher her whole life.
Oh, cool.
Teaching pre-primary in Ohio. So she just recently retired. She still goes in and subs, and she's 76. So she was dedicated to Montessori her whole life and taught. And I see it was very advantageous in a lot of ways now that I'm a mom, like with summer camp and all of that. And she was off during the summers, which was really nice. But that also meant during the school year, she was never really available to come to anything. But I often look back and, I wonder how she was able to survive the profession for so long.
Yeah.
And I think it does take a very specific personality to be able to like work pretty much alone,
Yeah, and I mean, so going back to your original question of having these like dual career paths, like
yes,
I finally landed myself.
I can take us off.
Yeah, no. I took us off too, but I finally landed myself in this kindergarten role, which I didn't actually think that I would love because I loved teaching the upper grades. Yeah. But it was COVID, and again, I was in that 1 year position, and I was thinking maybe I'll leave, maybe I'll just teach yoga. I don't know what I'm going to do, and then the kindergarten teacher at my school retired, and there was this opening, and my principal was like, do you want to try this out and see? And so I tried it out, and I ended up loving it. And so I think now that I've been in that role and I'm teaching yoga, and there are these like dual roles that I have in my career, they influence each other so much. And I feel like it's not so much about like burnout or not burnout. It's like find the environment in which you can do what you're meant to do, like to its fullest potential. And I feel like with each teaching role, I've just gotten closer and closer to that. And I feel like I remember coming to my school when I was first teaching there and telling one of my colleagues in like the staff room or something, she's like, how's it going? And I was like, I feel like I'm able to be the teacher who I was meant to be more here, and then like for everyone that's a different context. But
what do you think that is? Like, because it sounds like to be the best version of yourself, you really need to be able to have this like other identity. It's almost like a superhero. Like you put on your yoga pants and you go and do this other thing, which like, what does it do for you that makes you better in the classroom for your students?
I mean, I feel like the first part of that is like probably somewhat obvious, right? Like the mindfulness component, being able to slow down my thoughts, and kind of, it's like there's this, I think it's like this Viktor Frankl quote where he's like, between you and your reaction, there's a space, and I'm going to probably butcher this quote, but it's like, in that space lies your freedom, right? And it's like, I like to think of it as like the 5-second rule, like when you drop a slice of pizza on the floor and you're like, have a few seconds. It's like you have this like little window, and what yoga does for me as a practice, but especially teaching yoga, because when I'm teaching yoga, I have to be so present. And so I don't have as much, there's not as much like chaos going on in my mind, right? But it helps me see that gap better, clearer, and be able to kind of get in there and make more informed decisions about how I respond. And that really is just like the secret sauce to like being able to, like you were saying, like your mom with her long career of teaching, like I think that's just what ends up making it more sustainable over time, for me personally. And then of course, like for the kids and for your environment, for the classroom, it's going to make everything so much smoother and more gentle and more compassionate. So that's the biggest thing I think it's done for me. But then just also like differentiation is such a big thing for teachers. Like it's all about meeting individual kids where they are, right? So I'm going to differentiate this one project so that even, you know, my English language learners can access it fully, and my students with an IEP can access it fully, like all of that. Or my students who are, you know, like wanting more of a challenge. So you could differentiate things here and there. And going into teaching, that was very much like ingrained in us. Like you have to differentiate, you have to provide these scaffolds, you have to like meet students where they're at. But then putting that into practice is so hard as a new teacher. You know, it's like,
well, especially in kindergarten too.
Yeah.
But it sounds like your program was a little bit more academic based than.
Yeah. It was a lot more like theory, I think, at USF. And it wasn't as much, I mean, they put you in the classroom.
Oh, no. I guess I was thinking, I thought you were talking about in your own classroom.
Oh,
meeting people where they are.
Yes, exactly.
But I guess maybe that wasn't specific to kindergarten. It was just teaching in general.
Just teaching in general.
Got it.
Yeah, and I just, and my first teaching job was 5th grade math, which is like so hard.
It's hard. I hated math so much.
Oh my gosh. Everyone says that. Yeah.
I know women say that a lot. I think that, I don't know if they have cracked the code on how to teach math to women. I know there is that stereotype that women are better at like language arts and English and not as good as men. It wasn't until I went to culinary school and I learned culinary math, which is not calculus by any means, but
it's practical.
When I was able to relate to it in like a practical way, like it all kind of made sense to me. And now I would say, I mean, when my husband and I are out at dinner and he's trying to calculate the tip, like I can do it instantly, and like he doesn't have that access, but he could probably do calculus way better than me. So it wasn't until I had that practical experience and like need for math that I really understood it. I remember a teacher telling me like in 5th or 6th grade, and you know, math is in everything and there's numbers, and I was so like resistant to that, and I was like, no, it's not. And I just feel like I never got the math teaching that I needed. And I know that so many kids feel that. So
the math anxiety is really
I have
real.
math anxiety as a
It's hard.
40-something-year-old woman.
It's funny. I have it too a little bit, and I always make jokes now about how I like can't believe that I taught 5th grade math, because it's just like,
okay, what are they learning in 5th grade math?
Long division, decimals. It's like it just gets a lot more nitty gritty, and like the long division. Now,
I feel like I would ace 5th grade math right now.
Nice.
That's like probably my level.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to teach, but anyways, kind of going back to what I was saying, like when I was first teaching, it was like I knew I wanted to differentiate, and I did that more in terms of reteaching. So I would teach the whole lesson, I would try to give examples, try to be really engaging, blah, blah, blah. And then afterwards I would see who didn't get it, and then I would reteach it to them in a small group. And that was kind of the majority of the differentiation I did. It wasn't a lot. And then, but I knew I wanted to. It's like I couldn't see. It's like, you know, they say that like, I don't know if this is a great analogy, but like certain animals can see like way more colors than you can. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, you know, there's more out there. But so then teaching yoga has provided me this kind of like laboratory where I'm like constantly differentiating and constantly trying to give people different options, like on the fly. And it's just like, I just get this constant at bat practice where I'm like, okay, if you don't want to do a warrior 3, you do a pyramid pose, you put 2 feet on the earth. If you can, you know, if you don't want to balance.
When you said the meeting people where they are, like that is a huge thing in yoga, is like, everybody's bodies are different. Everybody's like bones are different.
Yeah.
And some people just simply can't get into the positions that, the person next to you. And so like, what's the best position for them at that time?
Exactly.
They could have an injury. Like you have no idea.
And then going through when, my mom was sick and I was dealing with that, and then losing her and I was grieving, I really realized that like it's even farther beyond just somebody's body and meeting their body where they're at. It's like meeting their nervous system. And like sometimes, I'd be in a class and someone's like, okay, if you can't balance right now, you can put your foot down. I could balance just fine. But then I took a class where the teacher said something like, if you're in a place in your life right now where you just need to have 2 feet planted on the earth, then you put your other foot down and it's okay. And that clicked for me where I was like, whoa, I don't know what's going on in anyone's world right now in my class. Like, and who am I to say if you need to be balancing just because you can, like, and so that like, I think has just totally informed my teaching practice in the classroom. And I feel like it's happened more naturally, like more organically, not as, I'm not like, thinking about yoga while I'm teaching my kindergartners, but I feel like just having that constant practice of like differentiating things and trying to meet kids where they're at and just trying to assume that everyone's doing their best, and you don't know what their circumstances are. You don't know what happened at home. You don't know if they're not doing it because they, can't, write the letter M, or they're just having a hard morning or whatever. But regardless, you can still meet them where they are and then provide them some different options.
Let's talk a little bit about empathy and creating boundaries, because that's something that you're obviously demonstrating right now. Is like you have a huge empathetic heart and you have to bring it to school every day. But there can be like how do you create the boundary specifically at school where you're not taking your work home with you? And then let's start there. Yeah,
I think one thing is like I've just really tried to, I guess, just like respect every student, every family's like story. Like their story is not my story. And like in a way, yes, like if someone's going through a really hard time, like of course it affects me and it makes me sad, and I do feel that empathy. Like I feel that pull of wanting to, help and be as supportive as I can. But I try to just be like, this isn't on my shoulders. This is not for me to carry. Like this is what they're going through, and like trying to just like differentiate my story versus theirs, my energy versus theirs. This is my body. This is your body.
How did you get to that point though? Because I don't think it's something that you just do. Like you have to have some sort of pain or enough like experience to kind of build that shelter around you. Yeah. So did you prepare yourself to do that? Like how did you get there?
Therapy.
Okay. So this is not something they're teaching you in school of like how to create boundaries. This is something that like you have to come to. Again, it's like the individual sport, or it's not something like continuing education or things that they're talking about in the school specifically for the teachers, like on how to do this. You just are kind of left to your own to figure out how it's going to work for you.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely been a part of the conversation, right? Like teachers have talked about this, people talk about how you can't take your kids' stories home, and you can't, but it's like, it goes beyond that. Like if when I was a new teacher in my classroom, I would have students who were dealing with like some pretty serious adversity, and we were asking a lot of them. Like we had really high expectations in the classroom, and it was really rigorous, and our classes were like 85 minutes. It was a lot. And so there would be things that came up all the time. And so if a student was like maybe having a hard time at home or didn't feel like they were learning, it's not like in the movies where they like put their head down and they're like, I'm just having a hard time because this is happening in my life, right? Like that's not usually how it plays out, right? Like maybe it plays out by them like calling me a name, or like, or they're just irritable, or, I tell them to do something and they don't want to do it. So it can even come across as like defiance, honestly,
Totally.
And so then like, so that's like more the raw, real reality of it, right? And so in those moments, as an empathetic person and as a sensitive person, I would pick up on that energy, right? And then I would meet them there. And then it's like, if you're really anxious, now I'm really anxious. And I would feel my body go into fight or flight.
Okay.
Right? Like,
so if their voice is raised, you want to match that.
Yes, I would have matched that. And I would like, then all of a sudden I wasn't able to just differentiate between like their feelings and my feelings, right? And then it's like, we're just, all of a sudden we end up in this spin cycle of like anxiety.
I do that with my kids.
Yeah.
Like when my son is yelling and like, because he's a loud boy, like it takes me right there. And then I'm like, and like yelling at him to stop yelling. And Okay, so what are the strategies?
So when I started going to therapy, which I started talking to my therapist because of what was happening in my personal life, but then, so often our conversations would lead into what was going on in my classroom, and she'd be like, okay, so like you have to notice like where their energy ends and your energy begins, and just notice that there's a boundary there, and there's a difference between empathy and compassion, right? And so a lot of times like practicing compassion as like a skill and a practice means being able to differentiate that, and then being able to, it's almost more of an intellectual thing versus like empathy feels much more in my body, right? Where I'm like, whoa, this thing is going on and I have this reaction. Yeah. And like, you feel like it in your heart when someone's hurting or something.
A lot of the language that we use pulls on my heartstrings, pain in my neck, pain in my butt. Like there's this physical connection to these words. So I agree. Empathy is this like, you're watching the Sarah McLachlan video of the dogs being abused, and like, your gut or your heart, or you feel this like something in your neck, this tightening, this like, oh my gosh, and you just have that. I've never thought about that. It has a physical component to it.
Yeah, I think so. And so it was really, for me, just about like noticing that, practicing my own kind of self-soothing, like very simple, like taking a breath or putting a hand on my heart or taking a moment or drinking some water, like trying to integrate those practices more. And when I'm saying it now, it sounds like I like figured this out. But I mean, this is like my whole 8 years of teaching that I've been like practicing this, and I still have like obviously so much, it's a practice, right? But
I know, but I feel like these are really good strategies, and they could be things that could prevent other teachers or people in a profession that leads to burnout, whatever that looks like in their specific profession. Like, I feel like you need to write a book on it, which you do. I know, like you write pretty prolifically on your blog, and I feel like you should share these strategies with people.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest learning curves, is like really practicing compassion, practicing compassion and noticing when I'm just being like, when I have that.
So just tell me again, and tell everyone that's listening, what's the difference between practicing the empathy versus the compassion? How can you control those levers?
I feel like empathy is more of a reaction, and then compassion is more of a response, if that makes sense. So like the reaction is like what I feel instantaneously when I notice, someone else is dysregulated, or someone tells me something that's really heavy or hard, or, and then compassion is like how I show up for that.
I see you.
I believe you, right? Like, how do you want to move forward, or just listening, or giving somebody you're just giving somebody space, or giving somebody time to process on their own. And then just being compassionate on how you move forward, I
love that. That's really beautiful. I'm going to try and do that.
It's
because
hard.
it is a physical reaction, and I feel it often. And it's not something like I particularly enjoy, but compassion is almost like a better way to look at things. There's this famous healer, Her name is Pat Longo, and she trains mediums and sensitives and intuitive people. And
Cool.
she has a saying, it's surround, ground, and shield.
Cool.
So you're surrounding yourself in kind of this bubble to kind of protect yourself, especially if you're super sensitive to others' energies, and you're and then there's the grounding and then the shielding of like, it's just really like a protective mechanism for when you're going out into the world. So when you were talking about that, it made me think of that.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about this offline, and I just want to touch on it because yoga teachers are in this kind of interesting role, and people often really want to get close to their yoga teacher. And I'm curious how you create boundaries around that. And we talked a little bit about, you phrased it, the sequence, the scope of sequence.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And like also like, I'm not your therapist.
Yeah.
Like, talk to me a little bit about just keeping like the boundaries. I think it's probably a little bit easier maybe with your students because there's other powers and structure. But like with your yoga class, like how do you do that, and what feels good to you?
Yeah.
When people want more of you, you know?
Yeah. I think it's going to be so different for every yoga professional because every studio is different, every person is different. And so, yeah, I've been kind of like ruminating on this a little bit, and like I'm a pretty open book, and I'm like very much a people person, pretty extroverted. And so typically like spending more time with people will kind of fill me up. It's not super draining for me typically. And like the one studio I teach at in the Marina, I've been there for years and years, and it's a more casual setting. It's a very close-knit community. So it's there's kind of a precedent there that like we're all kind of, we all chit-chat before class and after class. And so like I've gotten a lot of friends from that studio who I've met there who either I was their teacher or we practiced together or whatever, and we'll go get coffee. And I don't feel like I've had to deal too much with that like weird power dynamic.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like initially where, I've only like seen someone in my yoga classes, and then the first time we get dinner or get coffee, then I'm like, like we're out of our yoga clothes. But pretty much my mindset is like, as soon as the class is over, I don't know, I see us as peers anyways, but
right.
As soon as the class is over, like I'm not in a position to like give advice, or it's like if somebody comes up to me after class and is like asking me for advice on like their foot injury or their low back pain, that's the one I get most often, right? And like my first thought is like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physical therapist.
Right.
Like my first piece of advice is that you seek that out, and like, I can't, provide that. That's above my pay grade.
Right.
And then I'll say, here's some things that have like worked for me if I've gone through something similar, or, I can give like a little bit of little tidbits here and there. But if someone were to ask me for life advice or something that would be more in the context of like a therapist or a life coach or something like that, I feel like I would kind of dodge that in a similar way, right? And yeah, the conversation around like a yoga teacher's, scope of practice is like, I feel like a pretty hot topic right now in the yoga and wellness world. And I mean, I don't think it's just yoga. I think it's in the world of nutrition and just wellness all around. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of, authentic and inauthentic stuff on social media about what you should be doing.
Really? I'm victim to it all the time. I have no idea. I'm surprised I even got myself here today because there's just so much information out there of like what to do, what to wear, how to eat, like,
I know.
What kind of car to drive, not to drive, just basically how to live your life. And it's exhausting. So like tuning out the noise is
but I think
really important sometimes.
And yoga, there's this idea of like your teacher as a guru, right? And so there are a lot of yoga teachers like Bikram and people who have like, who are very like my way or the highway. This is, yoga will cure all of these things. Yoga will do this. Yoga will do that. You should eat this. You should, And like if you've taken Bikram yoga, it's like you can't even drink water for the first like 45 minutes. Well, you know, and it's intense. To me, like, while I understand there are certain benefits to going to a class, and sometimes it's nice to be in a class where you know someone's just going to tell you what to do and you don't have to make those decisions. I do love
that. Yes, that is nice.
That's not my style at all. Like,
but not the dogmatic of Bikram, where it's like you can't do this pose because your body doesn't look the way that it's supposed to, and so don't even attempt it. And like it's much more rigid and just. Yes. It's a negative feeling. But just like being able, there's like a difference. But I would say your brain is very aware because you're like, if I do something wrong, I'm going to be like punished versus like turning off your brain and like being relaxed and just like listening to the guidance and being like, you know, put into the different asanas. And that's different.
You want to feel held and like, you
want to feel supported, not this like rigid.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I think, you know, there have been a lot of contexts like that where teachers are saying this, you know, listen to me and you know, this will cure all of your blah, 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 or, you know, hands-on adjustments that are not safe or that are pushing people beyond their limits. Like, and so that's something that's like just been top of mind for me for ever since I've started teaching is like, what can I say that I know firmly, like, I know this to be true? And what am I saying where it's like, oh, I've just kind of heard this, but I don't know, like, you know, like there are some cues like, oh, in this pose, like this will reset your metabolism. And it's like, what does that even mean? I'm not a doctor. Who am I to tell you what's happening with your metabolism? You know, like.
I was asked to write when I was writing for a magazine, and they said, well, write something about like healthy Thanksgiving food. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, healthy to me versus healthy to you, or like healthy is almost this like arbitrary. I think we can all agree, like, there are some things that are unhealthy. But healthy is like, it's a very loaded term right now, and it's so individualized. Like, healthy to me versus somebody that is a vegan or someone that is has celiac disease or whatever. Like, there's so many different ranges. So it's it's like everything is a little loaded these days, it feels like. But exactly. the you know, Tony Robbins came out with his Netflix special, like, I am not your guru. And it's true. There is this like idealization and this power, I think, of a lot of yoga and health and wellness, where it's sort of like my way, and people kind of get sucked in. And there's been a couple of those organizations that have fallen over the last couple of years. One that I had a client that was involved in, and I can't remember the specific group, but things just all kind of unraveled. There.
I think you're right, though. Like, we do want to feel like we're being guided, and it is there's something spiritual in and of itself to like dedicating yourself to someone, to a teacher, right? Like, and kind of like just being loyal to that, and just, you know. And there
is something of like, I'm doing a program right now, and it's all functional movement. It's this really interesting program, and I'm sort of like, this is so out of my box. This is so out of anything that I've ever done, and that's what makes it really interesting and intriguing. So like, I do kind of like want to double down and just go all in on it, and like just feel like I gave it like a real good try to see if it works for me. So there is that, like, I want to be all in. Yeah, all in. But then I, you know, we'll see. I'll have to figure out if it winds up working for me.
That's so cool. And I mean, I feel like that goes back to like our original discussion about just being multifaceted and just like learning something for the sake of learning. My hope is that we're kind of getting back to that, like really valuing that as, you know, a society. Like, I feel like there's so much, like, so many ideas about like, oh, if you learn about something, then you have to monetize it, right? Like, you have to have your Etsy store. You know, there's not a lot of programs to like dive deep into yoga without, in the West, without
getting your
certification and then being a teacher, right?
Exactly.
So,
well, then what are you going to do? Do you think that is an American thing? Because, like, I just want to give you an example. In Europe, you know, a lot of them take a gap year. And I think the answer would just be like, because why not? You know, just because. Like, why not? And like, we don't. It's becoming maybe a little bit more popular here, but we don't have that like, well, why not attitude of like, well, let's just sit in a cafe for 3 hours because why not? What else are you going to do? It's life. Like you're supposed to enjoy the beautiful day.
Yeah.
And we like want, like you said, want to monetize everything, want to like do everything because there's a specific, like a means to an end, a goal, like something, an action, like something has to be done. Like, can't you just take a cooking class or do something or take a yoga thing just for the heck
learning
of it?
and dedicating yourself? And I mean, don't you think that COVID kind of created like for some people, for people who had the privilege of having time, to kind of
reconnect with hobbies and interests.
And like, I don't know, my hope is that that's kind of stuck around a little bit. I mean, there's masterclass and there's Duolingo, you know, like, I think for some people, like that's kind of stuck around, and my hope is that that continues.
This podcast is this is a passion project for me. I'm doing this purely out of me wanting to give back to the greater community of women in the Bay Area for no other reason than that. I'm not looking to get anything out of this other than like valuable conversations and meeting people and having human connection. And to your point, people were microbrewing, they're knitting, they're crocheting, they're doing different fitness things. I don't know, maybe doing something on Etsy. But to your point, like reconnecting with hobbies and becoming more rich and diverse, multifaceted people, which I think is a beautiful thing. And I would love to see more of that. Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're all living so much longer. And what are we going to do when we're retired? You know, a lot of people really struggle at retirement. They don't know what to do if they've had this identity. And I know this is an American thing that we don't. I've actually read that we don't have enough hobbies. People don't take vacation because they don't really know what to do with themselves besides working. So I guess my point is like, what are we going to do when we stop working?
Right. And I think it also goes back to our conversation around, you know, like we're in a sensitive time right now where there's a lot of conversations happening, different opinions and so on.
We're in the age of Aquarius. Everything is changing. It's awkward. It's sticky.
It's awkward,
but we're moving in the right direction. I've heard this from so many spiritual people. Like we are at this like tipping point, and something beautiful is going to happen out of it. But it's a little ugly and funky right now.
I love that imagery, and I agree. I mean, I hope, and
I hope too. I hope it's not,
but I think that practice of like if the more folks can kind of be in this like beginner's mindset for the sake of being in a beginner's mindset and be curious and like use our imagination and be creative, like that in and of itself, like with my kindergartners, like part of what like kind of puts us on the path of talking about diversity and inclusion and belonging and honoring different perspectives is just imagination, right? Like we do so much art and creativity and we're talking about using imagination, and they do so much creative play. And that, of course, it's helpful because they need imagination and it gets things firing, but also like that's what leads to being able to have these conversations where you have different perspectives and you can take that in and not feel defensive, and because you're like flexing those muscles all the time, even if you're doing it by like trying to learn how to knit, you know, like I really do think that all of that adds up, you know?
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. For more info, you can always find us at yin-project.com. Make it a great day.